We often have situations with gear that is sensitive, where it's expensive, and in turn, there's a challenge in designing the case pack to make it relatively easy to get the gear into the case or out of the case without compromising cushioning. But, and there's a couple different things we can do along those lines. Sometimes these are most acute when you have things that are odd shaped and difficult to grab safely and to go in the case so that wherever we are trying to support it, that we don't do damage to the gear in the process. So that's where we can work closely with your folks to understand where these points may be, and if we're involved early enough in the project, sometimes people actually modify their product with that in mind. And it might be, for example, just as simple as including 4 threaded holes so that we can attach a large plate to that device. And then in turn, we grab that plate with a cushioning system so that the cushioning never comes in contact with a delicate surface. And one of the most immediate things that come to mind there are prototype and satellite components, because they are made as light as possible for a zero gravity environment, but they're in turn are very delicate if you try to just throw them in a foam cavity. Cooling fins, things like that are going to break, bad things are going to happen. So that's an approach that we frequently take. If gear is wheeled, we very often see the need to get that gear suspended, because if the wheels are just sitting on the bottom of the case, then all the shock and drops the case goes through comes straight through to your equipment. So some of the tools that we can help people integrate into that are either indicators that that show whether or not that particular container has been exposed to an extraordinary amount of shock, or whether it has been tilted in spite of the instructions to the carrier that it's supposed to remain upright. Once in a while, though, we see stories of where carriers have actually abused the product and simply replaced the indicators. Another approach, again, that we can help integrate is internal electronic devices or sometimes even using some of those indicators on the inside so they're not accessible from the outside. But in the electronic device world, you can go a lot further. You can build valuable data that would help you relate if there does happen to be breakage. You can find out, did that breakage occur from a relatively normal transit experience, or did something really unusual happen to this one package that's a once in a million situation that may not be worth trying to buy insurance for in the future. And as well, it helps you build a knowledge base of the fragility of your product. And as you're well aware, as a lot of you are well aware from package engineering principles, if you're doing volume production of a product, you're going to send that out to test labs for vibration testing and drop testing to validate how sturdy it is, what it'll stand up to. And a lot of these tests originated with data drawn from the shipping environment. If your goal is to sell 10 of a $150,000 fiber optics monitoring instrument, most likely you haven't gone through destructive testing of 20 or 30 of these to get at that data. So it may well be worth having that accumulation of information. And as well, I want to circling back to satellite components, for example. The consequences of a satellite component, whether it's a piece of maybe not the actual component that's going to launch on the satellite, but a preliminary developmental prototype, the consequences of damage that throw that program off schedule could literally jeopardize scores of millions of dollars that have been committed to a specific launch date. So there's a tremendous emphasis on companies who supply that world, and the same goes for our friends in avionics, rocketry, etc., where the loss of a component could throw off many, many, many millions of dollars worth of problems if damage occurs. And this is a way of demonstrating that you're on top of these issues.